Hi, I'm Stuart Chamberlin, president of Chamberlin Financial in Boca Raton, Florida. Some of you who have watched my previous videos might wonder why I feel so certain that these predictable, repeatable cycles in the stock market that have continued over time will continue to be as predictable and repeatable in the future. Well, the answer to a large degree lies in the system. Just like there are many people that contract cancer during their lifetime who led very healthy and clean lives, if you find yourself struggling with some of what I call Wall Street's cancer in your portfolio, it is not your fault. Let's take the cancer analogy just a step further. Cancer starts with one mutated cell and then spreads from there. So the question becomes, what is that one mutated cell that starts the spread of Wall Street's cancer? Well, the answer comes in the form of a question. If you were the CEO of a major Wall Street firm, to whom would your fiduciary responsibilities lie? The answer is to your shareholders, not your customers or clients. So in that position, if there are two different investment options, which one must you recommend to your customers? An investment option that is extremely profitable for your firm, but just okay for your clients, or one that is marginally profitable for the firm, but will be better for your clients? The answer is option number one. If you don't recommend that one, and instead recommend the one that is so-so for your firm, but really good for the client, you are violating your legally stated fiduciary responsibility to maximize shareholder value, and as a result, your position could be terminated by the board of directors. So now you know how one cancerous cell gets the ball rolling. Still, our system, when it comes to these things, is better than the systems of most other countries. However, it's not quite perfect. The cancer then spreads vertically through the organization, first through the research department and then to the branch manager and ultimately to the broker or salesman. Now, obviously, we're talking about a traditional large Wall Street firm in this example, but there are a lot of so-called financial advisors out there that work with smaller independent brokerage firms. Unfortunately, most of them get their research directly or indirectly from some major Wall Street firm whose research and recommendations to some degree are skewed by their own profit motives. Now that we've covered how the cancer spreads vertically through an organization, let's focus on how it spreads horizontally. Surely the media is unbiased, correct? Well, if you're like most of my audiences, you probably chuckled or at least had a smile on your face upon hearing that. Imagine you are a writer or reporter for some source of financial media. At the end of the day, you're a professional writer or reporter, not necessarily a professional financial person. Perhaps in the past you had been a writer or reporter in different industries such as sports or history. However, you constantly have to come up with new topics to report on. Essentially, you have two choices: to draw data, research yourself and find topics to report on, or interview one of your sources that are your advertisers. By the way, how does the media make more money? Through subscriptions or through advertisers? The answer is advertisers, of course. So by going to one of your advertisers and asking them to tell you everything he or she knows about a particular topic, you're lightening your workload and shortening your learning process. At the same time, they get to put a spin on the topic that's favorable to their products or services, whatever it is they sell. Also, if you end up quoting one of their employees in your report, you might get some goodwill where they'll want to continue advertising with you. The choice is simple: do your research through your advertisers. Now imagine if the opposite were true, where you reported something that made it more difficult for your advertisers to sell his or her products. Then they might decide to rechannel their advertising dollars into different venues. At the end of the day, this selling of optimism goes from the top down within Wall Street firms, then spreads horizontally to the media. Then it takes one more jump horizontally to the schools that teach financial advisors. When I was going through the process of getting certain financial licenses and certifications, I experienced similar problems. It was a huge learning experience. What I realize is that the financial markets are not a left-brain mathematical thing. They're very much a right-brained emotional place. People make emotional decisions when it comes to their money. Even the most logical left-brain CPA, engineer, or actuary makes emotional decisions. A lot of the so-called computer trading still has to be verified by a human being who pushes the button, who's making emotional decisions. What I've learned through experience is that the markets are fueled by human emotion to some degree. When things get back-tested during a great bull market, like the 1980s and 1990s, these strategies tend to protect investors from the infrequent and small pullbacks in the market. However, when things get really bad, when investors need this so-called alchemy to protect them the most, is when it fails. Would you care to take a wild guess which strategies are still being taught at many of the schools that teach financial advisors? If you guess the same ones, then you're correct. Why is that? Think about who started the schools that teach financial advisors. Think about who regularly donates money to the schools that teach financial advisors. The cancer continues to spread horizontally to many of these schools. Optimism goes a step further when some of the smartest people in the world always come out with proclamations that this time it's going to be different. The latest, which we heard in the bull market of the 1990s, was because of technology. This time it's going to be different, and the market is going to go to the moon. But then it didn't. In the bull market of the late 1800s, people said that because of the railroads, the market would not pull back and it would go to the moon. Then we had a zero-growth secular bear market from 1899 to 1921. During that bull market in the 20s, people thought it would go to the moon, again because of the trucking industry. Now, not only could people take their goods and services to all parts of the country on the railroad, but they could take them off the railroad, put them in trucks, and ship them to the far-reaching corners of our country. This was the first time the market was going to go to the moon, all because of trucks. Then it didn't. In the bull market of the 1950s and 60s, people knew that we had jet aircraft and cargo planes, which could ship our goods and services to all parts of the globe. We also had automation that was making us able to build things faster and cheaper. Surely this was the first time things were going to be different and the market would go to the moon. Then it didn't. There have always been these really smart people layering this information on top who always come out with powerful arguments that this time it's going to be different. However, historically, every time price to earnings ratios get up around 30 or so, the market doesn't go sky high. If this cancer is spreading vertically through Wall Street firms, horizontally through the media, and horizontally to some of the schools that teach financial advisors, the real issue is that the average investor really doesn't have a chance of learning the truth about how predictable and repeatable these market cycles have been throughout history. At the end of the day, when all the information sources are joining forces to sell optimism, it can become very difficult to get a source that portrays a sense of realism. The human brain also wants to be optimistic. As Americans, we have more to be optimistic about, I believe, than most other countries. Our brains don't want to think about what could go wrong. They want to think about what can go right. However, I like to say investing is simple, but not easy. If you think about it, buy low and sell high is a pretty simple concept. The reason it's not easy is because of human nature and the brain. Most people want to buy in only after they've seen a good track record and things have run up significantly. Then they finally have the confidence to buy in. The problem is that this means that they might be buying in near the top, setting themselves up for a drop. Behavioral psychologists call this hindsight bias. I call it investing through the rearview mirror. The bottom line is, to be a good contrarian, you need to buy things low when the values have just become beaten up and most investors are afraid to buy them, and are willing to sell things when they're going up and you're making a lot of money. It's not naturally in our human nature to want to sell them. Some psychologists will talk about something called a law of attraction. The law of attraction says that you get in life what you focus on. That's why race car drivers are always taught never look to the outside corner. Look to the inside corner where you want your car to go. If you look at the outside corner, your car will probably go to the outside corner and you'll hit the wall. That's also why smoking is so difficult to stop. When people go home at night and say, I can't have a cigarette. Whatever I do, I can't have a cigarette. I can't have a cigarette. You're spending your whole evening focusing on the same thing you're trying to avoid. Unconsciously, it makes your mind want the cigarette much more. So how does this apply to investing? Well, the law of attraction says you tend to get what you focus on. That means if you focus on gains in your portfolio, you're likely to get gains. However, if you focus on avoiding losses, the law of attraction says you might attract more losses. That's why there are many statistics from mutual fund families who might say their average return over a certain period was 8%, but the average returns the investors realized was only 3%. The reality is that study after study shows 80 to 90% of all investors are more motivated to avoid a loss than they are to make a gain. That means the law of attraction will cause them to time things improperly and create more losses. Only 10 to 20% of the investors are actually wired to be good investors. In general, human beings like rules. We like to be able to go to a textbook and say, for example, given our age and our distance to retirement, we should have a certain asset allocation. That might be more conservative if we're conservative or more aggressive if we're aggressive, but it will give us a range. The problem with following the textbook blindly is that most of these rules and textbooks were written by Wall Street. They're written by the same firms we've been talking about and taught in the same schools for financial advisors. They include strategies designed to keep you invested in Wall Street's products so that they can justify their fees and commissions. There are times you need to discard the financial planning textbook and simply use common sense. For instance, if you just received your driver's license, you know that when the light turns green, it means go. However, if a light turned green and you saw someone accelerating on the cross street trying to get through their red light, would you blindly follow the textbook, or would you make a common sense departure from the textbook and let this fool go through the light and then pass after the intersection is clear? We all know the answer. Another analogy that might help is to say that I could go into the ring with Mike Tyson and box for a 3-minute round. I'm sure my wounds will eventually heal. But the question is, why would I put myself through that? On the other hand, if you said the neighbors got together and put a purse of $10 million together, which I would get if I just survived the first round, I might think about it. Yes, there's a risk, but at least there's a potential reward. Logical human beings don't like taking risks just for the sake of taking risks. They like taking risks only if there's a potential reward. When you understand market history and how predictable and repeatable these cycles are, you understand there are times when there is potential reward and there are times when there is not. My simple-minded philosophy is that buy and hold investing works when there's an upside potential and doesn't work when there's none. That means your two choices are either to use tactical asset management making wholesale moves into and out of the market, or to stay out of the market and use income-producing alternatives. So why is it Wall Street keeps this predictability and repeatability of secular market cycles such a closely guarded secret? Why is it that they tend to talk to us about the fact that the markets are random and unpredictable? To me, it's obvious. If all investors had their hands on this information and knew at one point we are going to go through a 20-year bear market, and they all sold at about the same time, the market would go to a level near zero. In the big picture, that wouldn't do any good for anybody, especially Wall Street firms, and it certainly wouldn't help these firms sell optimism. I know we've covered a lot of information in this video. If you have any questions about anything I've covered, please do not hesitate to give us a call or send me an email, and we'll be happy to set up a free financial consultation to determine if you've done all you can to prevent Wall Street's cancer from jeopardizing your plans for a comfortable retirement.